Welcome to Brilliancy or Blunder, the new series where I will be sharing with you the most crazy tactics that I've come across all week, every single one of which will tread the line between a brilliant move and a terrible blunder. Which is why I think this series is really going to help all you guys hone your calculation skills in what should be a fun and interesting way. But without any more talking, let's get into the first move. I was looking at some games from a friend of mine and I stumbled across this move that they played, which was rook to f6. Now this move is pretty wild. I'm going to give you all a couple seconds to pause the video and try and digest the position before explaining to you the main ideas. Okay, hopefully you've had some time to do that. The idea behind rook to f6 is actually really creative. The point is that you want to go to f5, and if black, say, captures with the pawn, then white's thinking, I'll play bishop takes on f5, and after queen takes, then I will play knight takes on f5, and I have won your queen. The calculation doesn't end here though, because black can try to capture on e5, but white does have the follow-up move queen to d3, and if you were to capture the bishop here, then knight to d6 wins the rook, and white should be much better. Additionally, pawn to e4 is met by queen to h3 now, guarding the knight and also pressuring the h6 pawn. So this looks like a winning tactic for white. The only other capture that we have to take a look at is rook takes on f6, but we just have pawn takes on f6 and now f5 is still falling and we should be doing amazing. Black cannot simply pass the turn back with something like king to g8 because then bishop takes on f5 comes once again and your queen is under fire. White is much better here. They can even just trade the rooks and be up a pawn. But you might notice by the way that I'm talking about this is that rook to f6 is actually a horrible blunder. And the reason for that is because black can play knight takes on f6. You might be a little bit confused here, and admittedly I was as well first looking at the game, but bishop takes on f5 actually doesn't work because queen takes on f5, knight takes on f5, you've won a queen for now, but black's able to jump into the position with knight to e4. This move attacks the white queen and also attacks the white knight, and after the queen moves out of the way to something like d3, rook takes on f5, black has incredible compensation for the queen, 3 pieces for the queen and an exchange versus the bishop, white's up 2 pawns. Still a pretty hectic position, but black is doing much better according to the engine, minus 1.5. This is an insane position that I'm giving to you for this first puzzle. If you were able to calculate that out, then really well done. That is some complicated stuff. Position number 2 is from one of my own games. I played it a couple weeks ago now, and I thought it was a great idea to play this move, rook to d6. A collinear move that shoves the rook into the opponent's face. Pause the video now, try and calculate some lines, decide whether or not you think this was a good move or a bad move. The key lines that we should be calculating here are moves like bishop takes on d6 and rook takes on d6. Bishop takes on d6 is met by pawn takes on d6, and if you were to capture with the queen, then bishop will take it, so of course you must take with the rook. But now in this position, my idea was that I want to play queen to e5 and go for the checkmate on g7. Hopefully all of you saw that. And I saw that after pawn goes to f6, queen takes on f6, there's queen to f7 trying to unpin, but now I would trade queens, king takes, take the rook after rook takes back. I thought I was doing much better. I have this pawn here, they've got an isolated pawn. I wanted to play moves like rook e2, b3, king g2, improve my position, and I thought I had decent winning chances. And that's all correct, but the move is actually a horrible blunder. And that's because black has absolutely no reason to capture with the bishop, which wouldn't be a very good move, and instead my opponent just captured the rook with their rook, given an inaccuracy but still more than sufficient, and after pawn takes rook, bishop takes, now we're in a little bit of trouble because the 2 bishops are staring at each other. I can't just do something like takes, there's no more checkmate over here, worst arrow ever, but there's no checkmates. I have no way to control the d-file, we're being dominated over here. And if I try something like rook to d1, which is a move that I considered during the game, then there would just be big time liquidation after bishop takes rook, queen takes, and queen takes f4. There really wasn't too much to play for here. At the least, black might have some drawing ideas pretty quickly. And of course, I was playing a much lower rated opponent and I didn't want to do that. So in the actual game, I ended up moving back my bishop, trying to go for some checkmates. Got a pretty terrible position. Won back a pawn though with a nice little tactic here, which is that after rook goes to d8, I have queen to d2, and now queen's going to d5 with a fork. So after this position transpired, I ended up swindling this rook endgame, mostly on time. But congratulations to all you if you were able to find that rook takes d6 is in fact a mistake rather than an excellent looking collinear move. Position number 3 is from a completely wild looking position. Black has just played pawn to c4, and I'm going to let you in on the move that I played here, which was rook takes on g5. Pause the video, try and figure out, is this a good move or a terrible move? I'll give you all a couple of seconds for that. The interesting thing about this move is that after capturing the rook, which is the most obvious looking move, you actually have this amazing checkmate, and this is what was played in the game, by the way, which is bishop to g6 check. This is a double check to the king, sacrificing the bishop. If you were able to see this, then half points to you, but unfortunately this move was a blunder. Little spoiler for the future, but we're going to see why this line works, which is that after you capture the bishop, then we can deliver queen to f5 check, and after the king moves to h5, then it's a mate. The king had to move to h5 because there's no way back. The knight's covering this way, the queen covers that way. Additionally, if you were to go king to g8, then there's queen to f7 checkmate too. So you might be saying, well, now this looks like it's actually a great move. What are you talking about? How can this be a blunder? If black does nothing, then I'm just going to go rook to g7 and we're going to win the queen and should be able to win the game, right? On top of that, there's no easy way to defend the g7 square, because if you try something like rook to h7, then it's just bishop to g6 once again. King goes to g8. Bishop takes on h7 check now, attacking the king with a double check, and if the king takes, then it's a queen to h3 is a mate. So it looks really, really good, but actually black has the insanely cold-blooded move pawn takes on b3, and you can see this pawn just moved to c4, captured on b3. We're winning a full queen after rook to g7 because you can't go king to e8, otherwise queen c1, and now queen c6 is a checkmate threat. So you must sacrifice your queen, but what's really, really crazy here is that black doesn't recapture the knight. I know, they just take on a2. It's completely ridiculous. I'll show you what happens if they take the knight. If black takes the knight, then we just play the calm move, pawn takes on a3. And on rook takes on a3, we have queen to g1. King has to go to the corner, and now queen to c1, attacking the rook over here. And after king to g7, you honestly, I would be astonished if you found this move. If you did, then that's amazing. But the move here, and the only move that wins the game, is pawn to e5, shoving the pawn forward into a square defended by 2 pawns, so that after the d pawn takes, we have queen to c7 now, attacking the e7 pawn. And on rook to b2, we can play king to h1, and there's no rook to b1 because the bishop guards it. e7 is now falling, king to e8, there's queen to d8, king to f7, bishop to e6, king goes to e6, queen to g8, king to h5, and queen to g4 checkmate. Also, if the other pawn captures, then we can play queen to g5 check, and at the very least, we'll win the rook on the next move. But the refutation after rook to g7 is queen takes rook, and after the knight takes back, as previously mentioned, you don't take the knight. Instead, you just play pawn takes on a2, rook b1 is following. Black will promote. Somehow this position is a draw according to the engine, where we were much, much better. If you are curious, the better way to sacrifice after pawn to c4 was knight takes on g5, with the idea being that it's a check this time, so there's no pawn takes on b3, and if you capture the knight, then bishop to g6 is working once again, because after king takes on g5, queen to f5, king to g7, rook takes on g5, rook has to go to g6, rook takes g6, king h7, and queen h5 is a ladder mate. So some truly wild lines there, but ultimately rook takes on g5 is a blunder, throws away the advantage, and equalizes the game. Now, this next position is actually from a classical game that I played almost a month ago now, and in this one, I decided to play the move rook takes on d5, sacrificing the exchange. And it's up to you to evaluate this position. Is this a brilliant move, or is this a misguided sacrifice? Hopefully that's enough time for you to try and figure some things out. And of course, the only line you really have to calculate is pawn takes on d5. Maybe you can take a quick look at something like rook takes here, but after pawn takes, you're attacking the rook, so obviously this is no good. So pawn takes on d5, and well done if you spotted bishop to b3, because this move is in fact brilliant. Bishop to b3 is now completely winning for white because the bishop will capture here, exploiting the pin. Queen covers all the dark squares, and black's king is in a horrible net, even though we're a little bit exposed. The best try for black here is what was actually played in the game, which is queen to b5, king moves, and rook comes into the game. But after queen takes pawn, which I played, now offering the queen trade. Of course, if you trade queens, then this is a winning king and pawn endgame. After this pawn moves here, I'm going to liquidate everything off the board and then promote this pawn. So instead of that, black delivered a check with the rook. I moved my king up. Actually, I went to h2 in the game. They gave me another check. I repeated once, then went to g2, and then to g3, and then to f3. Then I move up to g4, and you'll see eventually there are no more checks. We end up picking up the rook after h5, king g5. My opponent resigned the game because this diagonal is simply way too strong, and mate in another couple moves is inevitable. So because black has no good defense after rook takes on d5, it is actually a brilliant move. Well done if you deciphered that one, calculated it out, and extra credit if you actually saw this line here where the king gets to run up all the way up to g5, because I'm going to be honest, I didn't see it in the game and actually started panicking a little bit and got a little bit lucky maybe, stumbling through the tactics there. But at the end of the day, a win is a win, and a brilliant move is a brilliant move. So I think that's probably going to wrap it up for this episode of Brilliant Move or Blunder. I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed making it and finding those games, especially doing some extra analysis in those really crazy ones. But if you do want to send your own games so I don't just have to be taking these from my games, then please do link the FEN ideally if you know how to do that, because I think that YouTube might delete links if you try and share links. If you can send a link to a game where you had a brilliant move or a blunder that looks like a brilliant move. That's the key here, by the way. It needs to look like a great move, but actually be a bad move after a little bit of deeper thought. If you do have those kinds of moves in your own games, feel free to share them. You can also share the links in my Discord, which I will leave a link to in the description. That's probably an easier way to get there. So either comment section or Discord, either way, feel free to share your own games, and I will be using moves from your games in the next one. Give you credit if you want. If you don't want to stay anonymous, for whatever reason, I would understand that, and that is also fine. So once again, hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, I'll see you in another one.